In this video, we are gonna talk about FX menu set. So basically, this menu set is for the creation of the physics and simulations in Maya. Before I start to go to Maya and start creating some simulation and physics, I want you to be familiar with some of the engines that you can use it. One of them is Bullet. The Bullet physics engine lets you to create large-scale, highly realistic dynamic and kinematic simulations. The other one is nParticle, create numerous types of effects such as fire, smoke, or liquid. Fluid effects is another simulation engine. It's for simulating and rendering fluid motion, like basically highly realistic liquids like ocean, water, sea, like these kind of effects. And also you have the effects. We know that it helps you to create complex animation effects such as smoke and fire. So as you can see, like some of them, I mean, there are, for example, if you want to create a smoke fire, there are different ways to do it through nParticle or through effects. Or if you want to create liquid, you can do it like through nParticles or through fluid effects. Another thing that I want you to know, if you want to use Maya simulation or physics, basically the FX menu, there are two ways to use it. One way is to create animation, obviously using these simulations. The other way is to create basically some meshes without having the animation. So in this case, what you need to do, you need to create the simulation, play your animation, get to the frame that you like it as a mesh, and then go and delete your history, which is like edit, delete, and delete history by type. So basically, if you delete all these history of the physics that you created or simulation that you created, it deletes everything related to that simulation and it only keeps that single mesh for you, which you can save it as an obj later or any format that you want and use it like as basically a mesh that you want it. For example, there are different ways with the end cloth. You can create different type of fabric. You can create, for example, pillow. You can create flags, and then into the frame that you like, the form of the mesh, you can save it, delete your history and save it as like one simple mesh. Let's go to Maya and I will show you how you can use options in this menu sets. First of all, you need to go to the FX, and also one thing, there are just like different windows, I mean different options that I see it in my menu bar, and I want you to know maybe you won't see some of them. And if you don't see in general some of the options that I have, you need to make sure that you activate it from your plugin manager. For example, the bullet, I think this is one of the options that like even I have it like in the shelf as a menu on in the shelf. If you don't see bullet, which I see it here as well, I will see it in the menu as well. What you need to do, you need to go to Windows and setting preference and plugin manager and uh, use the name of the engine or plugin that we want to use. If you don't see it, you search it. So if you search, for example, bullet, you see it has the bullet bundle. I checked loaded and auto load in order to have it every time that I open like a new project. So make sure that you have that one. So one other one, maybe it would be boss, I'm not sure. So if you don't have, for example, this one, what you need to do, you just like go and search it, like already you download it in Maya, and what you need to do, you need to load and auto load it. So first thing, make sure then like the first basic animation that I teach you through simulation is the one with the bullet. And if you don't see it, then make sure to add it from the plugin manager. So what I'm gonna do at this point, I'm gonna create basic plane and I make it bigger. So I'm gonna show you with the basic mesh and like primitive forms to understand the concept of the simulation and the animation, but I want you to think it's like in a creative way how you can have different mesh or like models and like how you can think about having a meaningful simulation, not just play around and like have it with different primitive shapes. You can start it with primitive shapes like what I teach you at this point, but then think about it like how you can expand your skills into something more conceptual. So I created this one, and I also create a sphere. I'm gonna So let's so far I don't have any simulation. Let's tell you what is gonna happen if I add the basic simulation. So if I play my animation from the timeline, you see nothing happens because I have only two solid meshes that I add to my scene. So in order to make this one dynamic, I go to the bullet and I create active rigid body. So make sure that like always, as I mentioned, reset your setting. So before I apply it, I want to show you there is also the bullet menu in the shelf that you can do it from here or from the menu, top menu. You can click on it and add it. So for example, here, if I hover over my mouse, it shows, if I close this one, hover over it, so it shows create an active rigid body, which is like same that I opened it up from the menu, top menu. So I first need to select my objects in order to make it dynamic. So after selection, I click on this one thing is that which is like so annoying in the simulation in Maya. Many times you get like this error, it says like fails and it doesn't create it, but in general like I don't know why it says like the API isn't supported at this point, but um, I can keep doing and like finally it works. So right now let me go and edit, delete by type, history, and then again I add, yeah, as you can see right now, if I, yeah, I delete my history and right now I see my ball is moving. So what it does basically, if I play it, it pass, you see it pass that plane. I need to make the static or you know, the not moving mesh that I wanted. I need to create a passive rigid body for that one. Otherwise, like all my dynamic rigid bodies, they pass through it and like they don't stop when they hit that shape because they don't read it as a passive rigid body. So what I need to do, there is an option also to add the passive, create a passive rigid body here. I click on it, hopefully this time works. Yeah, as you can see, when it gets to my plane, it stops. You see, now my ball or a sphere falls, but also when it hit the surface, it stops and doesn't go through because of the passive rigid body that I added to this one. So it's like a really basic animation. So what I can do to make it like a little bit not complex but at least interesting, I can go to poly modeling and I can just like create something like a domino And I can duplicate this one, and then I select all of them, and I go to the bullet, and I create active rigid body. So as you can see, like this one is like falling a little bit. It means like right now it has the active rigid body. So what I can do, I can just like go back to the first frame, move the sphere and make sure like it's like a little bit basically hitting this object. And if I play it, as you can see, if it hits, then it creates that it falls the other breaks or like cubes here. The reason is that they fall because they are dynamic as well. They are not passive. So all my cubes and the sphere, all of them are dynamic. So I want you to also know, if you go to the attribute editor and if you see not the sphere, like go to the bullet rigid body, that's the part you can play around with the options and like see how they work. There are like so many interesting things that you can do if you play around with these options, and like try to get additional tutorial in order to understand like what each option means and like what they do. But I'm gonna like give you a little bit information about, for example, the initial condition. So for example, if I move this one and if I play it, you see it just like fall without having any basically um, velocity. So that goes like in different axes. So for example, if I go back to the first frame, and here I wanted to like have like some sort of like explosivity in order to from here move and like hit these breaks. So you see like this is like this, I wanted like to move toward the x direction. So what I need to do, for example, like for the initial velocity, let's increase it, like I make it 2. And if I play, you see it's just like have some initial velocity. It goes like based on a curve, but it is not enough. So let's make it 3. Yeah, it's like smoother. Make it like less than 3 a little bit. So you can play around. You can play with them. And for example, there is one option for the mass that it's really important. If you want to, basically your mass is the force that you have to another object, and the force of your main mesh to the other objects or other meshes. For example, if I mean right now 1 is enough for this sphere in order to make it uh, basically in order to hit these and let them fall. But sometimes you have something like some other shapes in your scene, and you want to add this basically simulation to it, but you see like it hits your object but it doesn't fall down. In order to do that, you need to increase the mass number. Think it like your mass is gonna be the force and the pressure coming from your mesh, from your dynamic rigid body. Another basic simulation that you can do, I find it interesting, which is like the NCLOT. So NCLOT, basically you can create different um, basically like the cloth effect or simulation for your meshes. So I started with like this basic sphere. So at this point, if I don't want to create like the active rigid but you're passive. If I don't want to have like a force like a bullet, then I don't need to create like the passive or active, don't be confused with that. So at this point what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add encloth to this sphere. Okay, let's do that. I go to the encloth and I click on the option in order to reset it, and then I create encloth. So what is happening if I play it? You see, first of all, it just like by adding the encloth, just like it falls through. The so in encloth, what you need to know when you create your encloth, let me also delete the bullet solver that I have it from the previous simulation. I delete it, and what I can do when you create the enclosure, if you want to make sure that this basic the simulation you add it to your object, you need to see the nucleus and the enclosure. So it seems it's working. I have it, and you see it goes through. Um, it if like most of the time when you create this simulation, they fall. The reason that they fall because the gravity. First of all, there is no surface to stop them from falling, because right now I created this plane, but I didn't assign anything to the plane to say okay, it doesn't fall. And the other thing is that the gravity lets everything to fall. So how can I fix this one? If I click on the sphere and if I go to the nucleus, or you can do it like by clicking on this small arrow on the attribute editor and find it. So here if you see, it has the option for the ground plane, so you can click on the use plane, and there are like a lot of options for the plane. So what is happening right now, you see there is something that like turns uh, green. Basically it's like a plane that I activated, and this one, it's always with the shape that I have. It doesn't let it to fall from my plane. And what I can do, I can just like go to the side view, and I need to make sure this is like under the first frame that I see it, it's under my mesh. So right now if I play it, you see it doesn't fall, and it's working fine. And for this one I'm gonna like move it a little bit. So this is what you get when you create the end cloud to this sphere. But let's see, there are, so you can have the start point for your um, basically the cloth effect here. You can set a start point instead of like having it like this. I can just like move it, and like I can consider this frame like after this changes happening as my start point. So what I can do, I go to, so this is the frame that I like, I just like move to the frame that I like. You can just like hack. If I don't make change, the frame number 1 is gonna be the start point of my simulation, but I want the frame number 18 be the start point. So when I select this one with the object, not playing this one, and go to the, let me find, yeah, field solver, and you can see here it has the initial state. It means like that I want it to be the initial start point of my simulation, and it has the option set for selected. If I click on it right now, the doesn't matter which frame I am, like if I go to the first frame, it starts from here, not what it was before. You can see. So what I can do with this one, there are If you go to the enclosed shape, you see the option for the presets. You can click on this one and you can play around with these presets. But first, I want you to know one thing. So when you create the enclave, there are options. So when I click on the nucleus, you see the different options for the attribute here. If I go to the shape, there are a lot of options that when you play with them and like change their value, they affect the form of your simulation. Okay, so it's like right now it's just like by default these numbers. If I go to the presets, there are some basically pre-made presets for you that you can create these effects. For example, like silk or water balloon or concrete, honey, rubber. So it creates the simulation, your simulation look like these options. But I want you to know these are not something sophisticated or different than like these options here. Basically, when you play around with these options, you get to these results and it makes your work much easier and created this form for you, this list for you. For example, if I click on the water balloon and if I go and like choose replace, so right now if I play it, I have some sort of, you see, my simulation has like some sort of water balloon, and what is happening right now, it's like a basically I created based on the form that I have something like a water inside my object, and that's the reason I see it. So for example, if I change the stickiness, see what will happen. I mean, like this is a simulation right now, you see, and if I increase the stickiness to 2 and play it, you see the bottom part of my object, like how it's stick to the plane. So yeah, I want you to work with them and like see how they um, different simulations react, for example, and you can always replace it with another simulation. So this is what I get from the balloon. You can also think about animating this one. So let's get rid of the preset that I have. I'm gonna like make it one without preset, and like I'm gonna change the values and like add keyframes. So basically for your simulation you can add the keyframe and like see different results under the pressure. So this is the part in your enclosed shape. You need to work with this one in order to get basically like most of the effect that you will see. It's like under the pressure. There are just like other options to in your attribute editor, but this is the one that you needed a lot. So for example, like the pressure method is like manual at this point. If I add the preset and I go like create like the balloon, water balloon, it's gonna like change it, I think, to like volume tracking model. I mean, these options are changing when you when you add a preset, but still you have access to them. And one more time, make sure that you find the pressure in order to want to affect the like basically inflated or like the inflated. So what I'm gonna do, as I told you in the animation, you can basically set a keyframe for every basically option in the attribute editor. And so right now, if I go and for example, like right now you see the pressure is 0, I can set the key. Also, I can like click on the volume tracking model in order to activate other options. I think I lost that option right now, but what I can do, I can just like select the one that I want and make sure, yeah, I have a keyframe here. So I'm gonna like get rid of this keyframe. Doesn't matter, I can delete it here too. So as you can see, it has like the pressure damping, start pressure, or like pump rate. You can just like work with this and see what will happen. So I'm gonna for example set a key for start pressure, or make it like 1. Set key, yeah, it, like you see it's like jumping. It has the start pressure that it has, and I will keep it, I keep it like 1, and I go in the first frame. And pump rate, it's basically the amount of like basically it's like the pumping, like the value that you have. Basically I think that's the one that you need to increase it if you want to inflate it. So I set key for 0, and I just like and like don't look at like this change, because whenever you reset and like come back to the first frame, you don't see it anymore. So like on frame 78, I'm gonna increase the pump rate to 1 and set the key, and let's see what will happen. You see, just like start inflating. And for example, I can go to the frame 160, and for the pump rate I make it again 0. Start pressure, I make it 0 as well, and set key. So let's add another keyframe like next to it. I'm gonna set the key for 0 for everything. So for example, I can change the air tightness. Yeah, you can see like by changing the air tightness, changing the value of the air tightness, basically now my keyframes works better. So if I go and like play, you see it pumps and then it deflate. So these are so many options that they basically affect each other, and it's like important to understand them. Understanding the pressure option is not that hard. You can just like go and like look for like what air tightness does, or incompressibility does, or like seal hole, basically seal hole if you have it activated. And if you, for example, if I go to the face and like create a hole here, by having this effect as like this, having a seal hole checked, what is happening, it doesn't consider the hole that you have it, it doesn't read it as a hole, and still you can have your object, you see, just like air is still inside it. Another use of nplot I can show you to get familiar with like n constraints, this menu as well, and I'm gonna like show you some field solver, other like simulations like air, which then you can just like go and search for the like turbulence, or like there are some interesting like other, or like drag, other simulations that you can use. For example, if I create, let's make this cylinder and change the radius, and then change the size. So I'm gonna like create a flag, and what I'm gonna do, create another plane. I'm gonna change the rotation, make it 90 here. From the attribute editor or from the channel box, you can change it in order to make sure this is the right one. And as you can see, whenever you see something black, it means, as I told you, like this is the inside and it doesn't like render it properly. You shouldn't have normal like something black in your scene if you want to render it. But if I like render from this view, I don't have any problem. But for example, if I have my camera like having a movement or like moving around my flag, then in this case, this part is gonna be problematic. So in order to save, basically fix this issue, what you can do, you can just like add a little bit thickness to your mesh. What I can do, I can just like command E at the extrude, and you see the thickness. You just like make it really small value, like 0.2. Even it's a lot, I'm gonna like make it zero point 0.1. Yeah, I think like that's a good thickness. As you can see right now, you don't have this issue. So what I'm gonna do, I go to the side view, and I'm gonna like align this one with my cylinder. And what I can do, I can just like create the end cloth effect for this one. Let's create it. I go to end cloth, create end cloth, and if I play it, yeah, it's normal that it falls, as I talked about it before too. So how can I avoid this one fall? Basically, like how can I attach this area of the end cloth or like the plane to this cylinder in order to attach it to the basically this cylinder. So what I can do, I select it and I go to the vertex mode. What I need to do, you need to select the vertices that you want to attach them. You can't like do it for the whole shape that you have. So I go and select these vertices and I come back, and what I do, I come back to the end constraint, and there is option transform constraint or point to surface. So there is one important difference between those two. If you want to not have animation later for the whole mesh or model that you created in your scene, you can add the transform constraint option, okay, which is like not confusing and like way easy, and you do it and your simulation creates, but as long as you don't add like additional animation. If for example, imagine like this is a flag like on top of a car, or like on like a flag of a ship, and your ship is just like moving in the ocean. So when the base, like this cylinder, is moving, then your simulation messed up if you do it with the transform constraint. In this case, you need to like choose the point to surface, and in this case you need to like make some minor like adjustment, which I leave this one for you to take additional tutorial if you want to do it like animation for the whole simulation that you have. If you don't have it like this, and it's gonna be the fix position and like the translate options of your object or mesh in the scene, then like do the transform constraint, and you just need to click on the transform constraint. And what is happening right now, if I go there and if I play it, as you can see, if I stop my scene and with alt B, what was that, or command B or shift B, um what was that, yeah, alt B, I don't know why it didn't work the first time. With alt B you can change the viewport color. So I make it this color in order to uh, see it better. So right now, as you can see, that part of the mesh, like my end cloth mesh, is attached to this base. And right now I have it. And what I can do, for example, I can select this one. This is just like an example. I can go to Google and search for US flag. This is fine. I put flag. And I come back here and I go to the first frame. For example, I'm gonna under rendering add a simple Lambert and make sure like you rename everything in your project. This is not the right way to just like assign different or just like create other objects and not assign a name for them. So I go and like look for flag, turn on this option which is like for my texture, so you can see like I see it, and if I play my animation you can see. And if I go here, if I click on the presets and I make it like silk, replace it. So basically I created this like um, basic simulation with the end cloth and attaching it to object. So for example, if I like stop at this frame and if I like it, if I'm happy with it, what I can do, I can just like as I told you, you can have it as a like frame, like a single frame to render it. And what you need to do, you just like click on the whole, like select the whole, and then go to the edit, delete by type, history. You need to also go to enclot and dynamic, like everything you need to delete the history. Okay, I want you to know that you have this option to have it as a mesh, as a polygon in your scene without having the animation. And for example, if I add, like if I go to the Arnold, if I create a sky dome and like if I render it, this is basically like the frame that I can render it. And like you can see, this like so easy. You don't need to go to the process of like 3D modeling. I want you to think in like which ways you can have your basically simulation or like physics in Maya. You can use it and take advantage of them for your modeling as well. So let's delete this one. And let's go back to just like one other simulation that I want to show you, which is like the air that I'm gonna add it. Let's get rid of this one and delete the nucleus. So I have this one, do Control D and like make another copy, and I create another plane. So I go to this view and I need to rotate this one. I go back to the channel box, and for the rotation I make this one 90 and I move it. Command E to add a thickness, so I make it, and right now go back to the object mode. What I need to do, I create the end cloth, and I know it's gonna fall, so I need to fix it. I go back to the vertices mode and I go to the front view. I select this one, shift, select the other one, and constraint, transform constraint. I go back to the perspective view, and yeah, you see it's working. So what I need to do at this point, I need to create the air solver. In order to create the air force, you need to select your object first. I mean, it's really important. So I'm gonna like go to field. You can go to the box, reset it. What is really important is the direction of your um, basically air. I think like at this point I want it like for X, but you can always fix it. I mean, like if you're confused, if you don't know exactly. And I'm gonna like change the magnitude, which is like the power or pressure of the air. So I'm gonna like make it 20 and create it. So what's happening when I play it at this point? So I go to the airfield and I play. Oh, and like I need to move this one up. I think that was the reason. Let's make that one again for the X. Let's make one for all of them. So I'm gonna like increase it and make it 100. Yeah, I mean like definitely if I increase it, I will see more of the result. Yeah, do you see it? So I am confused with the direction. I'm gonna like make it 0 for Y and X and play it. Yeah, you see it's working, like the X was the right direction. And as you can see, you can just like play around with these options, which is like the at basically like magnitude. The other one, like it's hard for me to pronounce it. And you can just like change your speed or inherit like velocity and like see how each of them work. So there are like lots that you can just like work in the fluids. You can just like add a lot of interesting simulation in boss. You can also even like create like some sort of like simulation, and then like for your objects just create a mesh. For example, if I combine them together. Okay, and then for example, if I go to mesh and create a mesh, and instead of 10 I'm gonna like create 2. Yeah, I mean like it's up to you, like the number that you want to do. And also you can change like the distance. Instead of, for example, I make it 0 for X, make it 0, and I make it 20 for Z. Instead of 20 I'm gonna like make it 5. As you can see, like and you can just like have 4. And then if you play it, basically you see you have the simulation for like a series of like mesh that you created. So imagine like if you want to like create a crowd, and like all of those crowd, they have like some sort of, for example, you can like create a crowd with like the human body and like have and cloth effect to them, which is like the balloon, water balloon effect, and just like it's like inflate and deflate, and then like at the end you can create a mesh for your crowd and like see what will happen. Just like think about like a creative ways how you can apply them. Also you can uh, get like look for like additional tutorials to see, for example, how you can create different simulations, like for the liquid or the fluid, or how you can like create like different particles. I mean, there are so many resources outside based on what you need to create for your animation.